A very good morning to you, Anneliese Dodds. Thanks so much for talking to us this morning. And I wondered if we could start with the breaking news here this morning that a person has died after a boat carrying 66 migrants has sunk overnight in the Channel. What's your reaction to that news?
I mean, this is obviously absolutely awful, heartbreaking news. One can barely imagine what it must have been like in the middle of the night with freezing cold water and the terror and fear for people on that vessel. And I think yet again, this underlines really that the criminal people smuggling gangs are putting individuals in absolutely appalling danger. They're profiting from this really disgracefully, and there needs to be far more done to break up those criminal people smuggling gangs. But above all, I think this morning we would all be really thinking about that person who has died and wanted to pass on our sympathy to their family.
OK, and let's move on now to what you want to talk about today, because you're saying that families are being forced to spend an extra £1,000 in shopping costs before Christmas. This compares to 2020, you say. So tell us how those numbers break down. What's included here? Are we talking costs for food? Are we talking presents? What exactly are the maths here?
This is overall spending costs by families, which tend to go up by about a fifth in the run up to Christmas, so in November and December. And that obviously reflects the fact that families are spending on Christmas food, for example, they're spending on presents. But with that enormous hike in prices that we've seen, up by around 23% in many cases, that's adding enormously to that bill. And I think the reality for many families, obviously, is that they can't just swallow that extra cost. Instead, what they're doing is going without. And certainly I've been hearing up and down the country from families who are saying, they're just not able to afford the kind of Christmas that they would like to have as a family because the money just simply will not stretch far enough. And of course, that is a reflection of the squeeze on living standards that we've seen over recent years.
And yesterday, interest rates were held once again, and it's not clear when they'll come down, according to the Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey. The challenge of flatlining growth is going to be a huge one, whoever is the next government.
Well, it will be, but there needs to be a plan to respond to it. And I'm afraid there's no plan from the Conservative government. In fact, growth has been revised down, not just next year, but the year after that and the year after that. Instead, Labour would be really speedily making sure we took action. We would be, for example, acting to get people's bills down. That's why we'd have that real focus on much cheaper energy. We've seen our country actually being left behind compared to other nations when it comes to those homegrown renewables. So we'd be making sure they were put into place. We would be insulating people's homes as well to get those costs down. We'd also be acting to boost wages. So, for example, with a fair pay agreement in social care, making sure that people had more money to stretch to cover these kinds of essentials for them and their families. And we'd be getting Britain building again as well. We set out those plans to shake up the planning system, to really get those big projects going and the home building going that we need for our country. They're just some of the measures we would be putting in place to actually secure that growth for the future, rather than have the kind of drift, to be honest, that we've seen over recent years under the Conservatives.
The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, has just announced tax cuts and is looking to do more potentially in March. Is that where you think the priority should be?
Well, I'm afraid Jeremy Hunt's alleged tax cut that's coming in January is just putting back £1 out of every £8 that the Conservatives have taken out in tax since 2019. So this really isn't going to be a significant improvement in people's finances,
So would you like to see
unfortunately.
more tax cuts?
No, we would want to see a plan, a proper plan. I mean, Labour's always been clear that the Conservatives' increase in taxation on working people is not something that we've supported. At the moment, we have one of the highest tax bills currently for around
sorry, if
15
you
years.
don't support tax rises, do you want to see tax cuts?
Well, of course, in the long run, we do want to see taxes going down on working people. We've been totally unambiguous about that. But what we also need to see is a proper plan for growth. We've not had one from the Conservative government. Keir has set out, Keir Starmer, his mission to ensure that our country has the fastest growth in the G7 with good jobs and opportunities up and down our country. We've set out the steps to get us there. And I'm afraid, as I said, there is simply no comparison with the Conservatives, who don't have a plan for growth, and people are suffering from that right now.
Voters do think, according to a YouGov poll carried out this month, the voters did say that they thought you'd do a better job on the economy than the Conservatives, but both your parties were outweighed by the people that ticked the box saying none of the above option. I mean, we've been in a 15-year slump in terms of wages. People still need a lot of convincing, don't they?
Well, absolutely. And I think that's also partly a reflection that we've seen so many promises of change over recent years, so many sound bites, so many different announcements that haven't resulted in that change. And, that's why Labour has been really clear in the run up to the next general election. We know that it is going to be difficult to turn our country around. We know that we will have to do it in partnership with businesses, with trade unions, with local people up and down the country, but not having a plan to deliver that change, which is the Conservative position, is simply not going to get our country where it needs to be. Labour is ambitious about Britain. We believe we can have a decade of national renewal, and that is going to be through making sure those missions for change for our country are implemented. And we're confident we can deliver that change, but it's going to be in partnership.
OK, well, Anneliese Dodds, we appreciate your time this morning. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.